Please begin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm still going to try to stay within the 30-minute track or so. I imagine some of you have a hard stop. So let's dive right into what we're going to cover with Concept Accelerator. First, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background and then share with you two actual case studies where we can look at results and see how Concept Accelerator works. And then third, just sum it up and look forward to next phase for what we're doing in concept development. So a little bit about Buzzback. You heard some already at the beginning, but we work with many of the top consumer product companies on a global basis, actually, as well as have MSAs with many of the large healthcare companies also. They tend to work with us in innovation, and what makes us different is our portfolio of visual online techniques that you see shown here. Here is an example of one of them, but they're designed to be highly interactive and engage the respondent using visual cues. And we do that to get beneath the surface and have consumers open up and express themselves in different kinds of ways. So first, I assume many of you are here because you're focused on concept development. And what happens in concept development is a lot of times when we're testing ideas, we focus mostly on the scores. But really what you want to understand are two things. One, did you get the idea right, and how can you strengthen it? And then importantly, how can you bring it to life? Because you want to understand how consumers are going to use it. Is it going to replace something that they're currently doing? Are you going to change behavior? And those are all things that we need to factor into the learning when it comes to developing a good idea. Now, at Buzzback, we've tested hundreds, if not thousands, of concepts over the years, and we know that there are many factors to consider when you're developing a concept, many of them shown here. But one of the big problems is, did you get the language right? Have you articulated it the right way? And we also know that concepts come in many shapes and sizes, meaning that you might be testing a pack idea, you might be testing claims. So all of those things need to be factored into what your plan is and how you go about it. And now, more than ever, there's some new factors that are influencing how we develop concepts. First of all, clients don't have the same kind of advertising and marketing spend that they used to have. Oftentimes, putting it on the shelf is the only promotion that the product is actually going to get. So making sure the pack works really hard is critical. Second, you have consumers spending up to 60% of their time on mobile devices. So think about how that impacts what your concept is and what your stimulus is. And that's a theme that we'll come back to later at the end. And then third, you have Amazon, or what we sometimes refer to as the omni-channel, that's blowing things up. And many clients are investing more in their pack and digital design because of how consumers are shopping in an online world. So all of these things need to get factored into your plan. And then as you saw in the video, if you were on when we first started, this is what we would call a typical stage gate process. But the reality is that many clients don't have the same kind of time and budget to invest in research when they're introducing a new product. This is a lot of the old world unless it's a really big global opportunity, and then they need to go through all these different gates or all these different stages of the process. The reality that we live in today is that it's more of an agile innovation journey, and you need to fast track and you need to parallel steps. So what do we mean by that? You might need to test the pack and the name at the same time, or evolve the idea along the way. You need faster ways to do it, and that's essentially what we're going to look at today. Now, the concept development process oftentimes starts really early on. You're probably familiar with many of these phases, but starting with ideation through to idea screening, and then really focusing in on your top ideas, and even getting to what we would call size of prize. So, what is the opportunity? How big is it? Where can I actually take it from a sales standpoint? We're going to cover some of that today when we talk about Concept Accelerator. So Concept Accelerator involves 3 steps in evolving your concept or product idea. We're going to go through each of these, but basically we're trying to disrupt the process. Take what used to take 16 weeks or so and cost, 6 figures from a budget standpoint, now to a 4 to 6 week process with a price tag of about half of that. And we'll show you how we did that with a couple of actual examples. So let's do that now and go into our case studies and hopefully dissect the process along the way so that you can understand exactly how we might get there. So the first case study is going to involve a shampoo idea, and here's where we did a rapid screening approach, and we'll talk specifically about the methodology that we used and what we learned and where that kind of fits in your process. The second case study will focus on a new jam idea, Aunt Julie's Just Fruit. And here we actually going a little bit deeper around the product idea, optimizing the language and even taking it through to a forecasting and sales opportunity. So step one, looking at a new shampoo. We have a part of the process for Concept Accelerator that we call rapid results. And most clients are doing this phase at the early stages of concept screening. And what they want to learn is does the idea have legs? Sometimes they have as many as 10 or 12 ideas at a time, and they want to keep their costs low to figure out which is the one or the two or the three that are best. And importantly, when they're testing these ideas and they're looking at scores, the brand manager wants to know or wants to make sure that they don't have the tallest giant. So if they have a range of ideas, how do they know which one or which two, and then what is the context for that to move it forward? And they need results quickly because this is the stage where you're screening and really trying to get a gauge of how to move forward. So we had actually two shampoo ideas, and what we covered from a methodology standpoint were both key measures as well as high-level diagnostics. And I'll go through some of the techniques that we use at BuzzBack to give high-level understanding, in this case, in the rapid results idea. We had about 150 or so category users for each of the ideas. They were done monadically, and we'll show you some of the results around that. So first, importantly, let's look at scores. I'm sure you're familiar with many of the key measures. We ask those here, and we can see that around half or so of consumers say they would buy the products or they would purchase. And we see likability scores are not so bad, just looking at them in the absolute. But importantly, we want to layer on the context. So this is what we would call the traffic lights, where we take the ideas and we compare them to a database. And what we can see here is that these ideas score relatively well on purchase interest and likability. In fact, in the top and second quintiles relative to the database. But we have some issues with relevance and price value. So we need to understand a little bit more about that in order to strengthen these ideas. So one of the techniques that we use when it comes to diagnostics is something that we call thought bubble. This is an interactive technique where we ask the consumer to answer a question in a third party. So we might say, imagine this woman seeing this product on shelf. What is it that she actually sees here? And we can get that language. And by asking in the third party, we get a more honest answer. We get a very rich answer. And we get some understanding around what the consumer takeaways are. That's really important language that we use to help us then strengthen the idea. And looking at it in summary, we can see that the all-natural is appealing, the packaging, it's a new idea, but there are questions around why should it replace what they're currently doing? The price seems to be a bit of an issue. So those are things that we would need to address when we're moving the idea forward. We can also look at attributes. That's another diagnostic measure, and we see a lot of the same story reinforced here. And then we also have a heat mapping technique or highlighting technique that we call concept focus, where the consumer can highlight the elements of the idea that they like or dislike and talk about why. And it is that why component that you see reflected in some of the quotes here that gives us understanding of where exactly we need to focus when it comes to the language and how to make the idea better moving forward. So yes, you're going to get all of this in just a few days. The typical turnaround is 3 to 4 days for this high-level reporting that gives you both the scores and the diagnostics to figure out how to move forward. So now what? Well, at this stage, some clients will actually go back and retest early stage ideas again, Or perhaps they actually want to move on to a more full-blown concept optimization. And maybe they've evolved the idea since the screening phase to make it a bit better and even look at size of prize or take it to a forecast step. So now we'll talk about concept optimization. Now this is the stage where you really want to go deep. You've probably narrowed down to somewhere between 1 and 3 ideas, and you want to make sure that the language that you have is very compelling. And then, if you remember, we talked about bringing the idea to life. So here's where we want to give it context. We want to understand how consumers are going to use it, even if it's just at the concept stage. And then, importantly, we want to look at size of prize. And we'll talk about how we do that within Concept Accelerator. For this second example,